Hello, how are you? Good morning, happy start of the week. Let's go with information about what's happening in the world today. The Secretary of Defense, General Ricardo Trevilla, has revealed the details of how the situation happened, in which El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, is arrested and eliminated. Also, international news, the issue of Iran, among other situations about what is happening in the world. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining. We are live. I thank the community for giving a like, for sharing. Thank you very much. Greetings to Lily, to Blanca Barcelo, and to everyone in the community who is joining us. Thank you very much. First, 2 comments. Let's get to the details then. What's happening? What has been revealed? Let's go with that.
A trusted man of one of Mencho's romantic partners was located, who transported her to a facility in the town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. At that place, this romantic partner met with Mencho, and on February 21st, she left the property, and information was obtained that Mencho remained at that place. En ese lugar. He stayed there with a security circle. On the same February 21st, the operation planning was carried out. It's doctrinal. It's an axiom of military operations carried out by armed forces all over the world that the one who executes the operation is the one who must plan it. In this case, it was the Special Forces personnel and the immediate reaction Special Force personnel of the National Guard who planned the operation. That same day, an operational force was organized made up of 3 components: a ground component, which consisted of personnel from the Joint Special Force, Army Special Forces, and the Immediate Reaction Special Force of the National Guard. As I mentioned, also an airmobile force made up of 6 helicopters and Special Forces personnel, which would head to the area of operations. To maintain secrecy and thus achieve surprise, to have the initiative and achieve surprise. They did not arrive in Jalisco. This force was under orders, on alert in some locations in states neighboring Jalisco. And a third component was a force that provided air support with techs and planes from the Mexican Air Force. Once it was confirmed on February 22nd, that is, during the night, when the presence of Mencho was confirmed, the ground forces are the ones who move to the place where the arrest is to be made. A perimeter was going to be set up. Mencho has 2 arrest warrants for organized crime. So a perimeter was going to be set up. We had the information, of course, from the aerial platforms that the personnel were armed. So was the federal law on firearms and explosives control going to be applied to arrest them in flagrante delicto as well? So they moved in, this personnel moved in, and Mencho's security personnel opened fire on the military personnel. Mencho leaving behind a group with a large amount of weapons. It was really a very violent attack carried out by the organized crime personnel, and the Special Forces military personnel fought back. A total of 8 criminals died there. Yesterday, it was reported that there had been 4, because that was the preliminary information we had at the time. As you well know, after the operations are over, the entire area is checked and 4 more bodies were found. 7 long guns were seized, 2 rocket launchers, 1 was a rocket-propelled grenade type and the other a blindicide. The rocket-propelled grenade is a Russian rocket launcher. By the way, in 2015, that's the one they used to shoot down an Air Force helicopter in the Outland de Navarro area, precisely during an operation that had been set up to capture this criminal. 8 vehicles were also seized, 2 racers, cartridges, and magazines. El Mencho and his close circle fled and went into a wooded area. This cabin complex was on the outskirts of Tapalpa, so there was a wooded area nearby. And that's where El Mencho and his close circle are heading. A perimeter is established. Special Forces personnel pursue them. They find him hiding in the underbrush and they open fire on the Special Forces personnel. They had rocket launchers there as well, but due to the pressure from the military action, they didn't use the rocket launchers. Fortunately, however, they did hit a helicopter from an airmobile force. This helicopter was forced to make an emergency landing. As a result of the attack, Mencho and 2 of his bodyguards were injured and 2 more criminals were arrested. Yesterday, as reported in the press release, 3 long guns, 2 handguns, a rocket launcher, grenades, magazines, and cartridges were seized. There, unfortunately, a soldier was injured. In the first action I mentioned at the cabins, 2 soldiers were also injured there. Once the situation was under control, the military medical staff went to the place where Mencho and his security circles were, his 2 injured bodyguards. They decided evacuation was necessary due to their critical condition. Support from a helicopter is requested so it can land and they can be transported to a medical facility in Jalisco. And Mencho is moved with his 2 bodyguards and the wounded officer. Unfortunately, they pass away on the way. Because of that, it is decided at that moment that the helicopter should head to the Morelia International Airport in Michoacán, where there is a fighter jet from the Air Force. But they arrive there, they are transferred to the fighter jet, and that fighter jet heads to Mexico City. That was decided because it was no longer convenient to arrive in Guadalajara, especially because of the situation.
There's the explanation. Now, there's a very intense moment. Let's see if I can show it here. There's a very intense moment within this commentary that's being made, within all this information, in which he expresses his condolences to the people who lost their lives, to the soldiers who lost their lives. At this moment, listen, his voice breaks there. In this part, we give.
First, I want to take this opportunity to offer my condolences to the families of our colleagues who lost their lives.
También vamos.
And to recognize our military personnel who carried out a successful operation. It can be seen from many perspectives, but it's clear that they accomplished their mission. And what was demonstrated? The strength of the Mexican state, there's no doubt about that. Thank you.
Well, that's part of the moment. It's a curious moment, hard to see. Obviously, the part, well, at the end of the day, the human part, right? The military almost never let that part show, let's say, right? On this occasion, well, the Secretary of Defense, General Ricardo Trevilla, who, well, is giving this report in the classic morning briefings, right? That's also important. And let's go ahead and see the summary or what the President herself says right there in the morning briefing precisely about this topic. Let's listen to this little part and we'll call it, well, as it is more or less, what is known about this situation.
All operations are carried out by the federal forces. There is no participation in the operation by United States forces. What there is a lot of information exchange. As we've said here several times, the understanding with the United States is fundamentally based on intelligence and information sharing. In this case, there was information provided by the United States government. They even released a statement, intelligence. But the entire operation, from its planning, is the responsibility of the federal forces. In this case, the Secretariat of National Defense.
Thank you, President. That's the part that raises several doubts. It is said that la operación on the 20th, when a trusted person of a couple is detected, del Mencho, that person is followed. Afterwards, that person takes the woman to where Mencho is, and that's how they follow her. From here. And that's always been seen, that the Mexican government decides, either due to pressure or on its own initiative, or for whatever reason, to go against one of these leaders. They find ways. There are always ways to reach these individuals. There always are. The point is to decide to do it, and when they don't decide, why don't they decide? I mean, it shows that it was possible to do it since the last 6-year term, as many times as necessary, but it didn't happen. And obviously all these kinds of things potentially bring consequences, in the sense that the chaos that was experienced in many areas of the country yesterday was generated, and obviously it was starting to be a call to take shelter, to the fact that in some areas there were no classes, and that each state is also making decisions based on how they see things. And in this case, what was said, at least in the morning press conference, was that by the morning there were no more blockades. That's what was said. But what can be and has been confirmed is that there were movements, there were organized crime groups doing their thing during the early morning hours. There was definitely activity from these groups during the early morning. There's a deployment. Let's get to the topic, because there was also an important deployment that took place. And that's the thing. It may be calm for some moments. It's uncertain, honestly. I mean, it's uncertain in the sense that it may be calm for a moment, but that doesn't mean things have settled down, right? I mean, Jalisco woke up on alert due to more fires and clashes that continued throughout the night. The federal operation resulted in the death of Nemesio Seguera. By the way, there's also a very curious topic, because it's said that they took him away in a jet, in a Gaza and Gaza, which at most has space for 2 or 3 people. I mean, the jets are very small. I don't know if you can really transport an injured person. It really catches my attention. Yes, I would understand if it was a plane. Maybe the general got confused. Maybe he was talking about some other type of aircraft. But what he says in the comment, well, you saw it, he's really talking about a Gaza. I don't see how you can transport an injured person unless 2 people are in the same place and at the same time you go, they go. Like covering up some wounds to make a super quick flight. But I see it as unlikely that it happened that way. Honestly, that part left some doubts. It's not exactly clear what is meant by what kind of house it is, in any case, to see how many people can fit there. But these are things that, among other things, leave some doubts. There's a deployment happening right now. It's a significant deployment, mainly, well, I can't say nationwide because this is more focused on certain areas. There are risks for areas where these groups have been active. Greetings. According to what is known, at least up to now, there is an increasing deployment. By the way, here's another report. All right. And right now, I'll tell you that there was a decision, and this is mentioned, I'll tell you who mentions it in a moment, that there was a decision by Mexico, by the Mexican government, that if this person was captured, they would not be taken alive. Yes, because this leader of a cartel group, and all of this had already caused many human losses among the authorities, soldiers, police officers, and so on. It had left many casualties. It had been very tough. Because there are groups that decide to never have direct clashes with the army unless it's the last option. But there are many groups that decide to practically never attack these soldier operations. And all of this, well, because at the end of the day, it's a business they want to run as smoothly as possible. But this particular group was very tough, very intense. So, within all of this, it's being said that a decision had already been made. This is reported by the journalist Loan Grillo in the outlet Aristegui Noticias. He states, that's what was intended, but basically his life would be taken, he says. This is what the A error of
Fue circunstancial, sino resultado de una determinación previa por el alto nivel de riesgo
it's ignorance.
de generación. Evidente.
That's what the police officer says. Sorrow of spirit, for he has seen her in his mind. It's likely that it happened that way. As always, he suspected of what happened with the Amabila family. Then it was after that, right, that they killed him? Basically, and not so much, well, it was at the meeting, remembering, just like really, really intense events, right? That have happened like this against people who have been really tough. In this case, well, this one. But now about the deployment that has been happening, this security movement they're talking about. There is a deployment of 2,500 troops according to reports within the country. Now, to me it seems like the deployment is bigger, but anyway, the media has been talking about a deployment of that number of personnel added to what was already there. So, we have to remember that these types of groups and cartels basically have a kind of paramilitary groups. They're very large groups and many times they're cells. In other words, it's not like they're all under the same command, but rather there are different leaders. Look, that part is very complex, so it's difficult to control this situation. That's also why sometimes it's something that just gets overlooked. No, certain leaders start to emerge because it's easier to put pressure on one leader than to put pressure on 5 new leaders that might pop up. Mexico would have deployed 2,500 additional military personnel just in the state of Jalisco. We still need to see how many are deployed in Michoacán or in other regions, where there are also problems. The Secretary of Defense had also already said that they had deployed 7,000 troops in the region, so that would add up to more than 9,000. This is a soldier in that region. A lot of people were talking about where this person was moving around, just like what happened with El Chapo, and the same has happened with other people, right? People say, look, there he is, and you saw him, he's on social media, right? Where was he? Well, I tell them, if you want to get to these people, you can get to them. And well, clearly that's how it is, at their discretion. The military operation ended not only with this individual, but it also leaves open the option for about 5 more names. That would be about to happen or to change, let's say, in leadership. Some groups could remain in the same cartel or others could emerge. And that's another situation. That likewise, if it's not addressed early on, it's going to keep growing. Let's move on to other matters. Let's talk about other important topics about what's happening in the world. There. It could practically be worse the worst.
Traría.
What a strange thing, thank you. Well, at least a move thinking toward a conflict. In the absence of agreement so far, Donald Trump is already considering a military escalation against the regime of the Ayatollahs. The White House is activating a dual strategy, the Geneva strategy and the military offensive strategy. On the one hand, on Thursday there will be a move, perhaps even the last one, as they say there, a diplomatic move in Geneva. They'll meet again, though not face-to-face since they don't see each other directly. They're going to the Omani ambassador's house in Switzerland. On one side is the group of Iranian diplomats, on the other side is the group of American diplomats. That's until Thursday, but the draft, in theory, will be sent to the United States beforehand, of what they might accept as a nuclear de-escalation agreement so as not to enrich uranium any further to weapons-grade levels. By the way, they already have enough uranium at this moment to have atomic weapons, about 10 to 12. And the other day, Rafael Grossi said, in a matter of days they could have enough enrichment to build a nuclear weapon. In other words, honestly, this all seems like everything that's happening, it seems more like they're just buying time. The United States knows it. The question is whether they will decide to attack or not. Basically, the President of the United States authorized one last round of negotiations. But everyone is also moving. Everyone is making moves. In fact, look, there's a very interesting image today. It's this one. This is the United States ship Gerald Ford, which was seen close to Greece. Do you remember that this one is in the Mediterranean? Well, let's go to the map. Look at where it is right now. Here is the United States ship Gerald Ford. United States ship Gerald Ford. It was seen somewhere near Greece, so it's already very close. In fact, it's practically already in position to have Iran in its sights. I mean, to have the possibility of attacking Iran. And on the other side is the Abraham Lincoln, which is in this position close to Iran. I mean, to be able to attack Iran. So, are they already there? I mean, Iran has also already made an internal agreement in which it's known who will succeed Ayatollah in case he passes away. And all the high-ranking officials have up to 4 successors ready, so if one falls, another one, and another one, they'll be in different places. And basically, whoever survives is the one who gets control of certain areas of the government. Their idea is that this regime doesn't fall. Obviously, that's what they want. But on the other hand, obviously the United States wants that regime to fall. And people can already sense it. People can already feel it. And there have been more protests, more videos and protest movements keep coming up. This is happening in different places. This is starting to happen today in Al-Shara. Universe, how do we do things here? How are you? Assembly to Isabel. Inside the universities, these protests are getting more and more intense, and I don't know if you can see it there, but they're literally flipping them off, the typical middle finger. Here's another image. Let's see if we have it there. This one looks a little better. Check out their hands to see if at some point you can spot the middle finger, flipping them off. Because on that side, I don't know if you can see it, they send them reinforcements, they send government people to stage a counter-protest. So, on that side they have Iranian flags waving them, and on this side they have flags with the lion of the former heir, let's say, or heir as some still call him. The point is that, well, they have actually been around there, those who are protesting. They were burning the flag, let's say, the official one of the Ayatollahs, which is this one, the classic Iranian flag without the lion. It's just that the flags are made with certain materials so they don't catch fire, precisely because they have to put a certain fuel on them. Because yeah, they were trying to burn it and they were struggling and they spent quite a while there trying to burn it and little holes would appear. Just that, but well, that's a topic that in some countries flags are made with non-flammable materials. Precisely because of situations like that, right? So, well, that's how things are on this topic. Let's move on to another detail, just the conditions from Washington. 1. Reduce the nuclear program to a minimum. 2. Cancel the ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel. They shouldn't have any. Remove support for Hezbollah and the Houthis. That's the 3rd one. And suspend internal repression. That would be point 4. Tell me honestly, which of those points do you think the Iranian regime will accept? Honestly, which of the 4 do you think, or do you think any of the 2 or 3? I mean, which do you believe? At the same time, Ali Khamenei warned that the war will not be regional, nor will it be limited. In other words, the warning is to strike at the fear that the West has. That is, if the war happens, it will spread. That's the approach Ali Khamenei has. If the diplomatic route fails, these are the next points. Attacks on nuclear facilities, that's a given. Number 2. The plan is to bomb all of the Iranians' missile factories. Number 3. Hit the Revolutionary Guard, that is, strike the military bases of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And they already have the positions, they have everything, but after that it wouldn't be overnight. It would probably take weeks of attacking all those positions. In theory, according to what they've said, a warning would be given, a warning about where they would more or less be operating, so that people don't go out or get close to the Revolutionary Guard military bases, or the nuclear facilities, or the missile factories, and all of this. Thank you. The minister, by the way, of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, considered that the only way to stop Iran, the only way there is no other option, at least for Israel. It is a large-scale war scenario. In other words, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says that the only way to stop Iran is a large-scale war, which Trump does not want. Trump is heading towards. And not that it's ideal. Wars are never ideal. Obviously, it's not ideal. In the sense that, well, I wish wars didn't exist. I wish nuclear weapons didn't exist, these kinds of things. But what they say is that the only option for that nuclear program to truly not exist is a large-scale war so that the regime ends. Basically, no, that's the approach they have. Impressive, this attack that happened in Kalinino at a Russian refinery in Tatarstan, according to reports. Well, look, the size of the fire, apparently it wasn't just some fuel tanks at that refinery and, well, just look at the size of the fire. Well, this is part of what's happening over there in the war between Ukraine and Russia as well. Well then, today, the bat unit was seen in Jalisco, okay? The bat unit is Mexico's special forces. If you can, look it up. There are several videos circulating about what the bat unit is and how it works here in the country. It's a little known unit, but it's the highest level there is. They're the Mexican special forces. When things get serious, it's this type of unit that gets deployed. Supposedly, it would be the bat unit. We'll see if this gets confirmed later. By the way, there's another matter happening here in Mexico that caught my attention, which is this curious image, right? This image showed up somewhere. I don't know what's going on there, but it seems to be a priest on a rooftop praying for peace. I think that's what it is. Well, in light of the events, obviously over there in Jalisco, Michoacan, and obviously in other states of the country, but he seems to be from, I'm not sure who he is. I don't know the name of the father or the priest. But, well, he went out onto a rooftop to be there praying now. Another matter that also draws attention is the case of Nancy Guthrie. Do you remember Nancy Guthrie? We've been following that case, right? The mother of an unknown television host, an elderly lady, 84, 85 years old. She's also an author. I think she has a book out there. Well, they're already looking for her, even in Mexico, right? And now they've found key information about this case. We won't go into detail, but it's her, right? Well, not her. She's the daughter and the mom. No, the mom is the one who's kidnapped. That's what is believed, at least, because there is evidence that shows that it would be a kidnapping. Now, what is known so far? No, what information is there about it? Let's go into detail. Not sure. There would be a report with the FBI, right? Ruled out, covered with some material, kind of like a backpack, according to the reports. There is already a development that would be key. The mother of the Today Show host, Savannah Guthrie, is in critical condition after the findings related to a backpack that could be a key piece in the investigation. So, in other words, this investigation or this matter could take a turn in the next few hours, they say. At the moment, it's not clear what the situation is. Not in the sense of whether she's alive to begin with, since her children are even afraid that maybe she isn't. Unfortunately, they have to question this, especially because of the way she was taken. The lady is sick, she needs medication. They removed the pacemaker, come on. A series of things that catch your attention and make you think that maybe she's not okay now. The group of volunteers were the ones who found her. It wasn't the police, but volunteers who have been helping with the case. They found them in the backpack. This happened on Sunday near Orange Road, not too far away, right? From Nancy's residence, over there in Catalina Foothills, Tucson area. According to the report, the backpack was immediately handed over to the Pima County Sheriff's deputies for forensic analysis. Yes. So, well, that's how it is, right? The FBI had previously described that the man was caught on camera carrying an Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack, 25 liters. Which makes the situation worse, right? What else is happening? Well, the FBI described the suspect as a person who is 1.75 meters tall, with average build, and well, the lady needs daily medication. The detectives also reportedly recovered multiple items, including gloves and other things. The sheriff of the area also posted that it's never too late to do the right thing, appealing to the fact that this is an important moment when it comes to these kinds of things. In fact, they've already set up a phone line where they've received thousands of comments and supposed, what do they call them? Well, tips, right? To find Nancy Guzzi. Shabana is the daughter, she's on the left, Shabana is the daughter. And well then, 1-800-CALL Federal Bureau of Investigation. The county hotlines are also there, the FBI hotlines. The investigation is, they say, at a decisive stage. First confirm. They're also using the gloves because they don't have the DNA on record, right? I mean, the person's DNA on the gloves isn't there. They don't know who it is with that. But look at what they're doing with DNA. Because in the end, it shows you what relatives you have, so now they're going for that. They're investigating the part, let's say, of the family tree, and they're going to try to determine if there's any relative registered in the DNA databases in the United States, for example, and determine that way. Hey, look, this is, let's say, the DNA of this distant cousin. Is it this person then? Let's see, identify which relatives there are, and of those relatives, which ones live in Tucson, and of those, which ones have the physical characteristics. And so, that's more or less how they're going to start narrowing down possible suspects. That's a really new and interesting topic when it comes to identifying a person who isn't registered. But what if there's a record of a relative, right? This is going to be a really interesting topic. Regarding the forensic side, right now there are a lot of forums I'm following to see how the topic is developing. And from that point of view, they say that different things are being done. Unfortunately, the person is elderly, and unfortunately, timing is very important. Also, the urgency is to find her alive, to find her well, right? That would be the ideal outcome in all of this, wouldn't it? And also to find the individuals so they can be held accountable for what they did, right? That would also be key. Let's move on to other very interesting, very important matters happening in the world. Notice who this person we're seeing on the screen is. This is not an 82-year-old person. There they're giving him a medical exam. There he is jogging, running. Not someone who, well, is doing things that are truly amazing. Yes, amazing is the word, honestly. Let's get into the details of who this person is and what he's achieving, really. Which, well, is very inspiring for many people, and, well, at 82 years old, they say he has the body of a 20-year-old. He is the ultramarathon runner, by the way, Spanish. His name is Juan Lopez. Just look at that, and he's breaking the scientific expectations for older people. The case revolves around Juan Lopez Garcia, a former mechanic from Toledo, Spain. He didn't start running. Pay attention, he didn't start running until he was 66 years old after he retired. He said, "Now is when I'm going to start jogging and running," and here and there he began. He could barely run at 66 years old. About 1.5, 1.6 kilometers more or less. Amen? Now at 82 years old, he already ran the ultramarathon, which is, let's put it in kilometers because here it comes in miles. Let's put it in kilometers. How much is the distance in kilometers? Let's see. In kilometers, it would be 49 kilometers. At 82 years old, his category is 80 to 84. His VO2 max, yes, that's a measurement that everyone has, right? But it's something athletes measure a lot, isn't it? His VO2 max, the key indicator of cardiorespiratory capacity, is the highest ever recorded in a person of that age. Experts say that his values, his VO2 max values, in other words, his body's ability to have oxygen, and all of this is like that of a guy between 20 and 30 years old, just to give us an idea. That's why they say, well, in his 80s, but he has characteristics more like a young man of 20 to 30 years old. Healthy, because there are young people who don't even reach that. Normally, VO2 max drops by 10% every decade after the age of 30. Every decade, 10% less, 10% less, 10% less. Well, this gentleman doesn't follow the scientists' standards, does he? His muscles extract and use an exceptional proportion of oxygen, allowing him to run long distances without collapsing. He reaches a maximum fat oxidation of 0.55 grams per minute, just like a trained young athlete, meaning the same level as a young athlete. I mean, no, not the same level as a 20-year-old, no, the same level as a young athlete. Scientists conclude that training and endurance, even when started late, can delay aging. But even, well, in cases like his, you can reach physical levels at least like those of a much younger person, right? The study reinforces that chronological age does not define physical ability, and in any case, what really defines physical ability is not age, but inactivity. I mean, being sedentary, being inactive, that's what defines abilities. In any case, obviously there can be illnesses, there can be other things, but as someone once told me, if you have an illness, it's very unfortunate, but that's all the more reason to exercise, all the more reason to move as much as possible. And everyone in their own way, and everyone, well, as they feel and want to, right? Obviously, right? In this case, at least this case, they say, breaks the narrative of inevitable aging and raises the uncomfortable question that we rarely dared to ask about age. What if it's partly, or at least largely, due to abandoning movement? What if that's the case? Very interesting, and well, there are a lot of stories like these, right? And as much as possible, I'll keep bringing you stories like this one, right? Which, I insist, are closer than they seem, right? But anyway, let's move on to other interesting topics about what's happening in the world. keep listening. What has been revealed by health experts, basically, who are focused on working in hospitals and all that, well, they started to study it. What's happening, what's going on in these emergency areas with the people who lose their lives, basically, right? Nurses and male nurses from the
agencia han revelado que han encontrado un patrón inquietante que se repite justo antes de que un paciente, según los testimonios, estos han estado publicando últimamente mucho en redes.
Let's get started. Pay attention. There are even forums. And speaking of the topic, they find that
las personas tienden a tener
here. I think you've already mentioned it to us a lot, especially in the channel we have for stories, right? But it's already being investigated by scientists to try to determine why this happens, which catches my attention. One of the things, for example, is that people usually see familiar faces, people very close to them, but who are no longer alive. At least that's what the nurses say, right? They describe that this also, many of them experience very sudden internal changes. Suddenly, from one day to the next, they become very spiritual, right? Thank you as well. Another thing that stands out is that, although this is not yet at the scientific level, it has been collected in different forums, even by some who talk about psychological topics. They say that hospice nurses and healthcare staff have been noticing a pattern where people start to remember, for example, how people claim to have very vivid dreams that they start to recall and see. People, not only those they know, but also strangers, as if they were great friends, just like that all of a sudden, right? For example, X shows up and asks, "Where's the person who comes out?" Then they list names nobody recognizes. An intensive care nurse says that all the patients who lose their lives or are about to lose them say exactly the same phrase. For example, "No, please tell my family that I love them. I don't feel well. I know I'm about to go." Many people, well, they speak as if they are absolutely certain, and the next day or in the following hours, well, they pass away. This, at least in some of the cases. They claim that, well, they have expressed basically how their perspective of what the afterlife is has changed, so to speak, not what they describe as, well, a kind of connection, well, with something else, apparently, right? There's something that catches my attention today, this going back again to the Middle East, but in this case to Syria. Finally, after 12 years of an issue that dragged on for too long, the United States has already officially announced its withdrawal from the largest military base in northeastern Syria. After 12 years of a very long process, a process in which, well, Bashar al-Assad, the former dictator of the area, well, fell. That, well, there you could see very tough movements of pro-Iranian Shiite groups who moved freely and from there attacked Israel or sent weapons to Lebanon, for example. Also in Syria, perhaps the most dangerous terrorist group emerged called Islamic State of Iraq in Syria, or Islamic State, which is also an extremely tough group and continues to operate. By the way, now more in Africa, but the origin was Syria, right? And there was an international coalition attacking those groups, including Russia and the United States, working together against those groups. In fact, at one point there were attacks, this was years ago, where terrorist groups joined forces with governments from the West and Russia and all. Groups would unite to attack all at the same time. I mean, it was intense, right? The whole situation. Washington begins this withdrawal. They say this is a cycle that has already ended. The United States officially began the withdrawal from its largest base, which is in Azaka province. 12 years of continuous presence, they were there. The movement began on February 23 today, with a first convoy of dozens of trucks and armored vehicles heading toward the border with Iraq. The United States Central Command did not issue any official comments, reinforcing the idea that this is a planned and politically sensitive withdrawal. With Qasem's departure, Ramalan becomes the last facility under United States control in Syria. And with that, basically the withdrawal, which will take about a week to complete. It's not just this departure, but several waves of departures. Apparently they're going to Iraq. And it catches my attention because if they're going to Iraq, maybe this also reinforces the idea that something is coming with Iran. I mean that they're leaving. And this is just my own comment because it still can't be confirmed that they're in the northeast. They're not up here in this part. If they're going to Iraq, will they stay here on the border with Syria or will they go all the way to the border with Iraq? That question is still unresolved. Diplomatic sources quoted by Agence France Presse, the Agence France Presse news agency, say that the withdrawal will be completed in about 20 to 30 days. So, for there to be 0 troops left in Syria, there's still about a month to go, but the withdrawal has already started. That's part of the story. It's part of the history of many things that have happened there for years. The East isn't just about Bashar al-Assad and his fall, it's also about everything that happened with the fight against Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, everything that happened against other radical groups, pro-Shiites, Peronists. It's just that, well, this has been tremendous, hasn't it? By the way, the United States, Donald Trump had already taken a while, honestly, but Donald Trump just sent a message to Mexico. Because of what happened yesterday, let's get into the details. Donald Trump sends a message in which he demands a tough stance against these organized crime groups. The President of the United States is calling for intensifying the war against the cartels after the fall of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. I'm not sure if it's the cartel's fall or just the leaders, but either way, the President of the United States sent a direct message to Mexico demanding that it intensify its efforts. The statement came hours after confirming the death of Nemesio Cheguera. The military operation in which the drug lord was killed left at least 26 people dead, according to reports. Well, at least official sources report different numbers, so there are also different reports, right? Also in Mexico, he says, he should intensify his efforts against all the cartels, in a message that was brief, not very long. They're usually very long. This time it seemed like he thought more before commenting and just went with that. Basically, that's it, not much else. Increase your efforts, try harder, basically that's what he said about that topic. He said that in the coming days or weeks, there will be an internal reshuffling, and during that reshuffling, things could get ugly. So, that's why the thing is to stay alert and see how things turn out. And obviously to ask for increased security in the area, to prevent, well, that it affects the people, the citizens, not the civilians. According to reports, is Washington possibly putting or seeking to put more pressure to have more intense cooperation or an expansion of cooperation from the United States? And so far it has only been intelligence. Both governments have said it, the United States has said it, and Mexico itself has said it. So far it's only been intelligence, collaboration, actions, things like that. I don't doubt that there could be some other collaboration in the future, but for now that's the issue, that's how it's being approached. By the way, let's move on to other matters. By the way, changing the subject, not going into what's happening over there in Ukraine and what's happening in other parts of the world, let me tell you that there was an attack, the one we talked about yesterday, a very strange attack, because the way it was carried out was unusual. There were no airstrikes in the far west area, practically in Poland. No, I mean there was an attack in Lviv. I think that was 2 days ago. We didn't mention it to you. And we said, hey, that's really strange because it's considered a Russian attack but not an airstrike. I mean, how did they get all the way over there? How did they infiltrate all the way over there? They carried out an attack. And it was a really strange attack. Because, well, they called the police like, hey, something's happening. So, the explosion happens when the police show up, right? President Zelensky called this act a cynical and cruel terrorist attack. The deceased officer was identified as Visto Victoria Espinkla, 23 years old, a member of the National Police of Ukraine, who responded after an alert about an incident at a store. The first explosion occurred when the officers arrived at the scene. There was a second explosion that went off after another group of police arrived. This is something that Russians commonly do. So, they arrive, they carry out an attack, and then they wait for the firefighters and ambulances to show up and attack again. That, from the start, is a war crime. Attacking a civilian area, but it's doubly a war crime when you attack again when more civilians arrive, right? The same thing happened there. So, the attack happens, more civilians arrive, more police arrive, and then they blow it up again and set off another explosion. According to the prosecutor's office, a 33-year-old woman was arrested. The woman was the main suspect. She is accused of having planted the explosives a day before and detonating them remotely. The Ministry of the Interior and Dr. Klimenko reported that the detainee was captured in Staril Zambir, near the border with Poland, in a joint operation between Ukraine's security services. So she was possibly heading towards Poland, right? Possibly? Evening, Yesenia. How have you been? Good morning, good evening, I don't know. Good afternoon, it depends on where you are, right? Cheers, Yesenia. How have you been? Draco, how's it going? How have you been? Very good. Greetings. Yes, actually, I already saw the answer and I have it pending, right? What National Aeronautics and Space Administration commented is interesting. Well, yes, very much in National Aeronautics and Space Administration's style, right? But, well, we have to talk about it, right? Yes, I have it pending to practice it, Draco. But, well, it practically doesn't reveal anything and says there's nothing, right? That's basically what National Aeronautics and Space Administration says. But, well, we'll be talking about it later, he says. Well, don't send them weapons anymore, he says. 67. How have you been, 67? Very good, he says. They'll say, let's see what happens in these 5 or 6 days left, says Draco. Marcella, how have you been? Very good. What's up? Thanks so much, Lily, for the likes, and thanks to everyone in the community for supporting us. Good morning, Dad. Greetings. How are you, Novak's dad? A big greeting, by the way, to all the channel members. Thank you very much for supporting us and for giving that extra here to the channel. Thank you very much for that. Marisol, also a huge greeting. She says, hello, friends. Honestly, what a storm hit here in Connecticut. We're buried, says Marisol. And yesterday we were just talking about how the snowstorms are hitting and all this situation. Thank you for the comment. What have they told you? I imagine they're going to be stuck inside because of the situation, right? Well, big greetings and good luck, right? There are several days coming up with storms for different parts of the northern United States, where there will be, well, already, for example, in New York, the alert has been issued, the state of emergency declared, right? What do they call it? Yes, that's great. So take care, that's great. Eliseo Marcela Tapatia, Jose Sanchez Parate, how are you doing? A big greeting, thank you very much, very good. Thank you. What does it say about the daughter's DNA? No, but the DNA they're looking for is the kidnapper's DNA, not the mother's. Well, no, they're not looking for that. What they're trying to find out is who the individual is. No, that's the issue there. No. And they don't know, they don't know who it is. Nothing. There's absolutely no information about him yet. Not at this moment. So, well, let's see. We'll see each other later. Take care. Have an excellent start to your week. We'll keep talking. Thank you very much. Blanca, Tapatia, Eliseo, to the whole community. Omar, greetings. How have you been, Omar? He says, my aunts and sister are teachers and said their schools have no more than 5 kids per class. There were very few people in Orizaba, so thanks Omar for the info. That's wild. Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of parents preferred not to send anyone. No, of course, that's totally understandable. Greetings, Rodrigo. How have you been? Very good. And to the whole community, well, thank you so much. A big hug. We'll be back later with more updates. A big hug. See you later.